Welcome to Defying Conventionalism with Tehdy Cosplay and Mera Rose. Welcome to Cosplay Carnage.
Ladies and gentlemen, creatures of all kinds, and every sentient being on the multiverse, welcome to the annual Cosplay Carnage, the event where the lines between reality and fandom are hilarious, yet impeccably blurred. And speaking of blurs, here comes our first contestant, Rory the Lion. Or as we like to call them, the lion who's too fabulous to be confined to any one fandom.
That's right, Teddy B. And today, Rory's serving us something unique. A blend of elegance, sass, and, well, let's just say extra. Rory is the kind of lion who doesn't just roar, they glitter when they roar. They're here to win, or at least leave us with enough sparkles in our eyes to last a lifetime.
I bring you the perfect mix of ferocity, fabulousness, and fandom. Behold, drum roll, I am Cosplay Cat Astrophe, the fiercest hybrid of multiple fandoms that no one asked for, but everyone deserves.
Ah, yes. Rory's interpretation of multi-fandom looks like if a Marvel hero, a wizard, and Pokemon trainer had a baby. And that baby got a discount on fabric from every questionable online store.
I mean, listen, if I were caught in a time loop and had to wear the same outfit every day for the rest of my life, it might just be this, if I got permission to add a little more glitter.
But look at Rory, absolutely nailing it. The only thing more layered than this outfit is their commitment to defying conventionalism. I'm pretty sure that robe is not a Jedi robe, but rather a blanket they borrowed from a Netflix binge session last night.
Honestly, though, you can't knock the effort. Look at Rory's posture. That's the kind of confidence you don't find in the Lion King, but you definitely find it in a lion who's ready to take on all the fandoms. No questions asked.
Rory's stage presence is impeccable, if you don't mind a little bit of, let's say, creative license. I've never seen a Jedi throw a Pokeball quite like that. And is that a superhero pose, or are they trying to activate a malfunctioning toaster?
Honestly, it's a work of art. A little confusing, but art nonetheless. I feel like Rory's cosplay is one of those pieces that you don't quite understand at first, but then you get home, look at it in the mirror, and go, wow, I really do like it.
You know, Mera, I think you're right. Rory's like a fanfic crossover, totally unhinged, but somehow magical. And that's what cosplay is all about. So let's just say this. If this costume doesn't win, at least Rory's probably made it onto the Pinterest boards of at least 3 different fandoms.
Oh, and the judges are deliberating, Teddy B. But we all know what's coming. The true test of Rory's flair is how fabulous they look while waiting for the results. The suspense is killing me, Teddy B.
Oh, absolutely, because nothing screams competition like someone who's clearly having the time of their life, while the judges look like they're sorting through 4 different fandoms of their own, and 20 other contestants are fawning over each other's cosplays and giving each other tips. It's so supportive.
Rory!
And the winner of this year's cosplay contest is not Rory. But in recognition of their pure audacity and absolutely fabulous cross-fandom extravaganza, we would like to present the Judges' Choice Award for Most Fabulous Cosplay to Rory.
Thank you. You know, I didn't come here to win. I came here to slay. And slay I did. Just like every single fandom I can possibly fit under this bedazzled jacket.
Bravo, Rory. You may not have won the official contest, but honestly, this trophy is way more sparkly than the grand prize. So take that, judges.
Rory, this is just the beginning. You've shown everyone that being fabulous is the goal, not the victory. Keep competing, keep dazzling, and remember, sometimes it's not about the win, it's about making a statement. And Rory, you've made many statements today.
Don't worry. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be back at the next contest, possibly with a new fandom to tackle, or maybe I'll just turn up in an entire galaxy of glitter. Who's to say?
Well, folks, I think we've learned one thing today. Rory's the kind of lion who will never be boxed in, and I, for one, am here for it.
Keep roaring, Rory. Keep dazzling. And remember, it's not about being the best. It's about being the most fabulous.
All right, I'm off to Google how to cosplay as every fandom all at once. It's time for me to catch up.
I'm just going to start planning next year's costume. Anyone want to help me with creating a fully functioning TARDIS? Anyone? No?
No.
Oh, fine. And welcome back to yet another episode of Defying Conventionalism. I think we're up to 5 now, Brian. We're setting a record.
We're setting a record, that's true.
I'm Mera Rose with Prop House 42 Productions and Shimmer and Shade Family Cosplay. And with me, as always, is, of course,
Tehdy B Cosplay.
And today we've got a whole amazing crew of people with us.
It's a lot. It's an amazing crew. It is. It really
I'm
is.
telling you, between the knowledge and the talent on this particular episode is going to blow your mind. So, we have had the wonderful experience of working with all of these people in the convention world and in cosplay. And we wanted to bring them all together and put them out to our audience so you guys could get to know how amazing they are and how much they have done for the community. So we're going to start up here at top left, which, for everybody else that's oriented is probably right. I don't know. You guys know I have dyslexia issues. With the amazing Mandy Pursley. So Mandy, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm really excited to be on with you today. I'm Mandy Pursley. I'm with Be the Spark Cosplay. I'm a cosplayer who has a disability. I have a limb difference, so I have a cool bionic hand. And I also have EDS, so I kind of know the invisible illness side of it as well. I've been cosplaying for about 15 years now, and I've gotten to participate as a contestant in some pretty high-level contests across the country. And I've also gotten to be a judge for a lot of contests. So it's kind of cool getting to see both sides of that and just being able to be a voice for representation for our community in all these different ways.
Yeah, Mandy is phenomenal. And, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that she's done for the community. But just to kind of give you an idea, it doesn't just end at San Diego Comic-Con. No. I mean, she's brought some pretty high visibility, including a talk show appearance that I definitely want to get to, too. So in our top right or left, the opposite direction, we have Kim Is Possible, who is another phenomenal cosplayer that has done some really awesome things. So Kim, tell our audience a little bit about you.
I'm Kim Is Possible. I'm a competitive cosplayer. This is the 10th year of cosplaying for my family and I. My story is a little different because I kind of became more disabled as I went on. And so I started off kind of pretending I wasn't disabled, just ignoring my chronic pain. I have celiac disease, I have autism, I have ADHD, and I have fibromyalgia, and that's what's been diagnosed. I am looking into an EDS and a POTS testing because I do feel like I have a lot of those symptoms as well. I have had them for a long time. I use mobility aids, so I have a cane, I have a wheelchair and an electric scooter, and I will alternate between those depending on the situation, the space we have. And I do a lot of performance as well as craftsmanship builds. So I think that about covers it all.
Yeah, you're pretty phenomenal. I mean, you've done some really neat things too, and things I want to talk about today as well with kind of working in your props.
Yes.
I mean, you've done some really cool stuff to make those mobility aids very, very costumed, and it's just so cool. And so, of course, we also have the amazing AbbyCat Cosplay, Abby Solars, with us. Now, again, the orientation thing, bottom that way. It's that way. So, Abby, tell us
as top center.
There you go. All right. So, Abby, if you can tell our viewers a little bit about you.
Well, I'm AbbyCat Cosplay. I am a semi-professional and competitive cosplayer, and I've been doing that for about 10 years. I've been sewing for 30 years. I am also a disabled cosplayer. I have depression and anxiety, as well as I'm on the autism spectrum, which covers the invisible side of it. But in the last 2 years, I became legally disabled when I was diagnosed with cancer. And as a result of my cancer treatment, that has affected mobility in my right arm and hand. So I do also need some, you can call them medical devices. I need to wear compression garments at times.
And that's something that a lot of people don't think about, is the kind of unseen accommodations that go under or get included into the costume that you're wearing, so that way, you can continue to function. So we're going to talk a little bit today on the overarching view of what, cosplay and disability look like hand in hand and at conventions. And that is why we have probably one of my favorite people in the con community, so near and dear to my heart, Todd Vaarwerk. And so, Todd, can you please tell our amazing viewers who have no idea how awesome you are, who you are?
Well, first thing, never believe your own press. Secondly, I'm the only non-cosplayer on this screen. I'm a disability rights professional who lives in the Northeast, who's been working with conventions for the past 30 years to make all aspects of convention attendance accessible. So my expertise here is to talk about how and why we can accomplish these things so that all of your excellent work gets seen by more people.
And Todd has done amazing things in this community. For those who are just coming to the show new, or maybe have no idea who Brian and I are outside of this show, or what kind of crazy things we've done, Brian, you want to tell them a little bit about your experience with disability and cosplay?
Sure. So my disability is another one of those unseen. I actually had a full hip replacement 4 years ago at the age of 38. Fun times. It was a wonderful time. Before that, I still do drag a little bit on the side, just for charity, mostly for charity. But leading up to that replacement was a very fun 3.5 years where I would muster myself through a show and then be dead to the world for 2 days because I couldn't move. So I definitely feel that with that mobility issue in particular. So yeah, and migraines, and all those other things that we get when some people just kind of take them for granted. No, they can be debilitating at times too. So.
Well, and the mobility thing cannot be understated enough. Like, the more issues you have with mobility, the more it can impact, how you're able to access the stages and actually put on shows, especially at conventions, which of course are temporary fixtures. And so that's actually, that's how I got into all of this. I haven't outed myself yet, Brian. I got to out myself now.
Mera, tell us about yourself.
It's kind of crazy.
Tell us about yourself. Who are you?
So since 1996, I'm sorry, 95. I gotta fix
30,
that. 30 years. This is 30 years. So since 1995, I have been a competitive cosplayer, and I began competing as a costumer in 1995 at, of all places, Dragon Con. The con that shall be amazingly named as the Amazing Con in Atlanta. Mera, fix that. So, starting back in 1995, I began competitive cosplay at that awesome con in Atlanta as Tempest Rose. And that was the name that I went by in the competition community for a little over a decade and a half. Did a bunch of international competitions, made myself absolutely miserable because I am a costumer with multiple sclerosis who is exceptionally neurodivergent, diagnosed with atypical autism under DSM-3 back in 1987. So when we talk about social skills, I learned all of my social skills through competing in cosplay. And it's been an interesting road. But if you ever came across me at a con and was like, why doesn't she seem as friendly and hyper and all that as she is on stage? That's why. I can turn it on stage, but sometimes it's not so easy backstage. And so, you know, between that and, of course, type 1 diabetes and a whole bunch of other wonderful things like an amputated finger and I have multiple disabilities, but I also once I met my husband and we got together and started having children, became the mom of 5 amazingly just perfect human beings, all of whom have genetic disabilities. And so it opened up a whole new world of learning how to advocate. I never really cared about advocating for myself. I tried to help other people at conventions, but, you know, until my kids were in it, it was not the, I must find ways to make this work that it became once I had them. So that's why on Defying Conventionalism, you know, Brian, we've, and I think Todd will probably speak to this as well. I've been defying conventions for a pretty long time now.
Understatement.
And so now you know where the name comes from. But yeah, the Defying Conventionalism show will have at least every 6th or 7th episode an episode on being disabled and being in the community and how to advocate for yourself, how to be able to access stages, how to accommodate your needs and your costumes. And today is the overview episode that kicks it all off. So thank you all so very much for joining us. Alrighty, so let's get into the nitty gritty. Brian.
All right.
Ask the first question.
So we talked already about who we are, what we're doing, what we do with our cosplays. I kind of want to just hear some of the ways that, like, with your cosplays in general, just as an overview, how you have adapted some of your cosplays to what your needs are. So let's start with Abby. Abby, go ahead.
So one thing that has affected me with my arm is I have a condition called lymphedema, which means I can have some swelling in my arm and hand. One thing that makes that a lot worse is heat. So it gets real bad during the summertime. And guess what happens during summertime? Lots of cons.
Yeah.
Lots of cons.
Lots of cons. Even cons in Atlanta in the summertime. So heat and humidity. So one of the things that I have really started doing and paying attention to when it comes to creating my cosplays is paying attention to my fabric content, or my fiber content. If you avoid polyester, then some of those heat issues are going to really be so much better. So I am at a point now where in order to make sure my lymphedema doesn't get bad or exacerbated or it doesn't get so uncomfortable that I can't even participate in the con, I make everything out of cotton or silk or linen or rayon, just anything that can breathe. Get those synthetic fibers out of here.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about you, Mandy?
Yeah, I actually do a lot of the same fiber stuff as well. My last big competition piece was made out of silk because I was like, I have to spend the money to not die during this competition.
Yeah.
I'm also really careful because I have POTS. So if I get really hot, my heart rate just skyrockets. And so I've learned that I can't wear wigs for long periods of time.
Yeah.
So I've just learned to create characters that don't need a wig or maybe have a ponytail attachment instead of covering my full head. And then also, I think on the flip side of that, you're accommodating yourself, but I also want to include my disability in a positive way. So I do a lot of prosthetics that are just cool artistic pieces and kind of add to the costume instead of, trying to hide who I am. I like to make that kind of the shining star of the piece. So
Yeah,
kind
I
of what I'm
love
doing.
what you've done.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think my absolute favorite one I've ever seen that you did was the Cinderella.
I was
Oh,
gonna say,
thank you.
are you
Cinderella is that was
Cinderella with a
so
glass
beautifully
arm.
done.
I
So
love that
beautifully
one too.
done, so.
So, Kim, what about you?
So my biggest thing is accommodating the costume to my physical and my overstimulating needs. I have very sensitive skin. I've always been the kid who can't have a tag in their shirt or I'll rip it apart trying to get it out. So if I have to, I have a nude bodysuit I wear under entire costumes like princess gowns, She-Ra, just to have a cotton barrier to make my skin feel better and not have any like seams that might rub somewhere. I also make a lot of my pieces easy to remove.
Yeah,
One
that's a
is
good
so I
point.
can get in and out of a wheelchair sometimes because like some pieces just don't always. If you have a train on your competition piece, that's not gonna sit in a wheelchair very well. So I try and make them snap on a waistband separate so I can take that off and leave it in a green room or in my hotel until I need it. Yeah, I don't do a lot of wigs. When I wear Madame Raz, I'm pretty sure I have heat exhaustion every time. I have a fan pointed at my face every minute I'm not on a stage.
I was going to say that
I got
Rapunzel
to
wig
die.
begs to differ. Your Rapunzel wig is gorgeous, but I love how
That
you
was
did the build on it so that you
Yeah,
could
that
take it
one
on
was
and off.
engineered. I copied a lot of what I see from the wigs, and I was lucky enough to get an official Parks guide on how they styled it.
That's nice.
So I was able to build it in two pieces. So if it's pulling on my head and I'm having like that neck tension, I can unsnap it, and the braid is just snapped to my shoulder. So it looks like I still have the braid on, and I have free movement of my head. The top wig, all of the weight is centered around here. So it's very balanced. So the Rapunzel is actually an easier wig that I wear because of how I built it.
Mhm.
But something like Elsa, I can only tolerate for a couple hours until I have migraines because she's just so back heavy and I have to anchor her hard. So
Yeah.
I try to not do wigs, or if I do wigs, I try to do some that I know will be comfortable or that I don't have to anchor very hard because my hair hurts.
Yeah.
My hair is so sensitive, it hurts.
I get that. No, I totally get that. I think, something that is becoming a big overarching theme here is all of us have enough experience in our bodies, right? That we all kind of know these are the things we got to figure out how to accommodate when we're trying to make a costume. And so, if you're new to cosplay and you are disabled and you're going, oh gosh, I need something that's going to give me a barrier between people because I just can't handle having people that close to me. You got to think about your buffer zones and the things that you want to kind of, keep from people hitting. And that's a big thing that I do. That's actually one of the reasons why I use as many hoop skirts as I do. But, the other things with like, you were talking about your sensory issues with your skin and the bodysuit that you use. I need compression wear because I have to have sensory input to know where I am in space. So I actually put thermoplastic panels in my corsets so that when they pull in, there's more structure to them so that I actually have that input telling me, okay, your core is here, kind of thing. And so these are all things that you have to be able to consider. But to be able to consider that, you have to know yourself. You have to know how your disability is impacting you, especially impacting your ability to navigate in space. And you got to be able to, do that planning in your head. So then we talk about once you can do that with your costumes, you got to be able to do it for the events you're going to, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to be able to do it backstage at costume contests, ideally before the costume contest, right? Mm-hmm. You got to be able to do it at the conventions. And, the convention world is now finally starting to pick up on the fact that disabled people in general are here and we're coming to your events, and we are a significant part of your consumer base. And so they are taking very seriously the obligations that even though they're a temporary event, they've got to make some changes to the way that they do things to help accommodate people so that they can attend those events. So Todd, what kind of things have you seen happen in the last decade? Because this was not always the case.
No. I think you've started it by kind of identifying that even though the events are temporary, they're still businesses selling a product, which makes them what we would refer to as Title III entities under the law. Now, for those people that are listening, you might be saying to yourself, I'm a cosplayer, but I'm not a disabled cosplayer. Does this really apply to me? And I'm going to say that it's likely that it might, because the definition of disability is really important here. Because Abby said something that caught my attention in the introductions. She became officially disabled when she got the cancer diagnosis. I'm sorry, I got to break the news to you. You got officially disabled when you got your first diagnosis that identified you had a substantial impairment in a major life activity, because that's the federal definition of being disabled. A substantial impairment in a major life activity. Now, if you don't know what a major life activity is, ask yourself this question. What are the first 5 things I did when I got up this morning? I do this with people that I work with all the time. I come from an independent living background. And I ask them this question, and they'll say to me, well, I had breakfast. So I look at them and go, so the food is right there next to the bed, is it? Like, no, well, I have to, I got to get up and I got to go to the kitchen. I'm like, yeah, and how do you do that? Right? Or somebody will say to me, well, I went to the bathroom. And I'm like, right there in bed? That's got to be messy. So you start to think about it. It's seeing, hearing, moving around, thinking, emoting. The list of things that are impairments in the law is substantial.
Bathing,
so before
dressing, eating, toileting.
Instrumental activities of daily living, right.
Yep.
And that includes everyone who needs glasses.
Yep.
Not people who are blind, people who need glasses.
Visual
Correct.
impairments are a thing,
Correct.
yes. And auditory processing issues. There are a lot of people out there who are in school who are diagnosed with a learning disability. They'll be diagnosed with, some sort of auditory disability or maybe with dyslexia, dysgraphia. All of these are still disabilities. And especially as a cosplayer, if you have dyslexia, it can impact you quite a bit. Because stage directions are hard enough as it is, stage left, stage right. Right. But when you are reading through the contest rules, sometimes they don't put things in ways that really
gotta
come
be able
across.
You got to be able to understand that stuff. Now, not every disability may need a substantial accommodation, but the disabilities are the disabilities, right?
Yep.
And when we get into what's been going on the last 10 years, we've been seeing the intersections of all these things that conventions deal with in their ecosystem. For example, if you want to ramp on a stage, it's the convention's responsibility that there be a ramp on a stage, but they don't own the ramps. They don't own the staging. They're renting staging.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a thing, and I've noticed this at a lot of conventions. They'll sell you staging for a reasonable price, but if you ask for an accessible ramp to that staging, the price goes up substantially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it becomes a thing because the definition of this in the law is what's called reasonable accommodation. So it's reasonable taking into account how big the event is, how much money the event has access to in order to provide the accommodations that are necessary. So if you're looking at an event that's running on the, $30,000 shoestring budget, and the venue company says, well, our staging company is going to charge you $2,000 for a ramp.
Which is not
Well, if you
uncommon.
can't-
And that's
if you
actually
can't
a pretty
get a
low
grant-
price.
Right. If you can't get a grant for that, that might not be considered reasonable, right? But what's been happening in the last 10 years is in working in those ecosystems, they start to kind of get the idea that the contractors have to be responsible for that. That the event can't put the blame off on the contractors or the vendors, and they have to recognize the roles that they can play and what is reasonable for them.
So we first experienced this, I think, when we started seeing events denying ramp access because they could not, Todd's talking about the fact that ramp access is expensive, but there were a lot of cons that, would say, hey, look, we're too small. We don't have that kind of money. So it's more reasonable for us to just put a contestant out in the audience and have them roll down the, walkway and do their parade in front of the stage instead of being on the stage. But then we saw a lot of people that felt like that impaired their ability to do, a actual skit. If it was a skit competition, there were a lot of people that felt like it didn't get the lighting that it needed for people to see the presentation of the costume on stage. And so competitors started making the argument that, they were being unfairly disenfranchised because of the fact that they didn't have access to the same stage that all of the other competitors did. And so I think people have experienced this. I mean, I'm fairly certain, I was going to say, Abby, can you speak a little bit about what you've gone through?
So full disclosure, my issue was not related to a medical need. But it is something that if somebody in a wheelchair had been in the same competition as me, it definitely would have affected them. And that was when I competed with my French Taunter, which has a mobile castle. And when I made that castle, I looked at the standard doorway sizes and average wheelchair sizes. And I built my castle size around those numbers, figuring if I make it about as wide as the average wheelchair, then the accommodation should work with the castle. And when I competed with that castle, there was no ramp. And I was told that I'd have to walk in front of the stage. Performance is a huge part of the way I compete. And especially with a character like that, where literally you could only see me from shoulders up. It was so much about the emoting, where if I wasn't on stage, nobody would even see it, that I had a little hissy. And the solution was for somebody to help me carry the castle up onto the stage, up the stairs. And it wasn't heavy. Carrying it was doable. And then I sat there on stage during the entire competition, so that when my turn came up, I could pop out of my castle, do my little walk, and then go back and sit on the back of the stage.
Yeah,
not fun.
It's not fun, but it is. I mean, it was the most reasonable accommodation I guess they thought they could come up with, which at least they did something.
And I was lucky in the sense that my castle was not heavy, and in the sense that I could move. I could sit on the floor in the back of the stage, and I was physically fine to do that. It was uncomfortable because I had to sit crisscross applesauce on the floor, and I'm in my 40s, so there's that.
Okay, but I'm just going to say this right now. If it's not comfortable, then it's part of the issue.
Yeah, but I mean, I do think that if somebody had been in a wheelchair in the same competition, they would have been in an even worse situation than I was. And I've competed with people in wheelchairs. I took that same castle to another competition. I did a different character. I was Toad. And this was a different con. And in this con, they didn't have a ramp, but they had an elevator, a lift. But the lift was too small to fit my castle. And because it was too narrow, which means it would have been too narrow for wheelchairs.
Yeah.
And that was when I was going through treatment. So I was in the middle of radiation during that time. So being able to move my castle without having to carry it upstairs would have been really helpful.
Yeah.
I think one of the things like that Abby's hitting on too is a lot of times these accommodations would be good for everyone, and not even just people who are in wheelchairs. I was at a big competition not too long ago, and there was not a ramp. Like they ended up finding one at the last minute and bringing it in, and there was no competitors who were in wheelchairs, but it was going to be a problem for a lot of cosplayers to get big, heavy cosplays up a teeny tiny set of stairs to be able to get on stage, just with visibility and mobility and a whole lot of other issues. It would have benefited everyone.
Yeah.
Right. A little trade secret. What the conventions are starting to realize is cosplayers walking up a set of stairs for staging, walking across a stage and walking down a set of stairs to exit is a risk for them from an injury standpoint. So having a ramp,
I have a story.
reduces the potential for injury, right?
Let's just say,
which will help
backstage.
with their liability
Those stairs
insurance.
Correct.
Stairs are not well lit.
And
Yeah.
there was an event that was able to take the risk to get a ramp from their stager because of the argument that they were making about saving money on their liability insurance, because they had created a universally designed staging environment.
And I think that's a very important thing. Kim, you have actually been injured due to a lack of a ramp. So can you tell everybody a little bit about what happened?
I've seen it too. So the first thing, this wasn't a disabled cosplayer, but it was in a contest that I competed in. He was on stilts. They weren't massive stilts. They were not massive drywall stilts, but they were enough of a lift. Missed the stairs, face planted onto the edge of the stage in a costume that was all foam armor.
Oh, God. Yeah, and by the way, foam does not break your balls.
Walk off. Yeah, I've seen another one almost walk off because his costume had vision impairment and stilts, and he thought the stairs were one place and they were not, and he almost missed the stairs and face planted off the stage. So it is a liability for those armors that you want in your contest because they look impressive and they're crowd pleasers, but they do have vision and mobility issues in some places.
And hearing, because if you've got helmets on, you cannot hear instruction, and you can't hear someone calling you from off stage going, you're about to go off, which is one of the reasons why, at least in some of the contests I've run, we've had stage safety people whose entire job was to run out and grab people and pull them back. So
if I see there's a gap next to the stairs that could be misidentified as the exit, I put people at the stairs, like, here is where I am. And I also make sure before the contestant goes on, I'm like, will you need the ramp? Will you need the stairs? What accommodations are you going to need? Just to make sure that people are safe, like when I'm helping at a contest.
So tell us what happened to you for the lack of the ramp.
So I was in a fashion show in my Wicked Witch, and my stage walk went really well. And then I was walking back behind the stage. I was stepped on the cord cover, those big angle things to cover the cords that are supposed to keep you from tripping. My ankle subluxed and I went down really hard and sprained my ankle, and they did not have a ramp, so I could not take my scooter onto the stage. So I did the stage walk on a sprained ankle and then immediately left to go find first aid.
And see, I think this highlights one of the things that we've seen a lot, right, Brian? I mean, we've run some contests with some conventions where people have said to us, look, cosplay is just a secondary thing. It's not really driving as much as you think it is to this con. So we're not really that worried about it. We're not going to put that much money into it. That's a problem because I think, at least I hope, these cons are starting to wake up to the fact that their costume contests draw people in. Their costume contests bringing people in sends more money to their vendor halls and to them. And if they're doing a costume contest and they're not taking these things into consideration, they can actually be costing themselves more money, right, Todd? Because their liability insurance is going through the roof. So
And we've got to be a little bit louder for those in the way back.
Another thing that's frustrating about the competition side of accessibility is a lot of times you do not know what you're walking into.
Yes.
Because will there be a ramp? who knows? Will there be a lift? Will there be just a single step? I've done a stage walk where part of the walk, part of what was on stage, was taking a step up. Like, it had a little raised platform, and that was where I was supposed to do the walk. And that didn't work for my costume. I had this thing I was dragging on wheels. That, how am I supposed to get something I'm dragging with wheels up a step?
So
My favorite is when you ask if it's accessible and they say, sure, it's accessible. It's one step.
yeah, I mean, I think at this point we should probably talk a little bit about best practices, right? Because there are bound to be some people listening in who are involved with running conventions, running events, putting on costume contests. And really, the community as a whole needs to start considering what the best practices are so that they can, make sure that they're staying on top of these things. So I'm going to go one by one. Hit the top for you. What exactly do you think is one of the best practices a con can put in place? Mandy?
Well, I'm actually going to give a positive shout out. I was a judge at Planet Comic Con Kansas City last year, and I mean, Tiffany and Mera Dixon were kind of overseeing that, and they are amazing. And like, they had a green room set up that had chairs and snacks and water that people had accessible the whole time. There was a ramp onto the stage. There were people to make sure that, hey, did you need anything? Just to kind of make sure everyone was doing good and had their needs met. And these are things, like I said, it benefits everyone to have a cool place to sit down, to be able to change, to be able to take your costume on and off between judging and the actual, stage show. Those of us who have disabilities might need those things a little bit more sometimes, but that doesn't mean that these things aren't things that would benefit everybody to have. So we give them a shout out for a really great job.
Yeah, no, Tiffany and Tamara are amazing, and they will be on a future episode as well. We're going to discuss a lot more about advocacy, and the two of them are just phenomenal advocates for the community. So big shout out for them, and big shout out to Planet Comic Con, because you guys had really put some great stuff in place.
They're amazing people.
They really are. All right, what about you, Abby?
Well, in addition to enough places to sit and the ability to access water and snacks, and we're not talking about like craft services. We're talking about like a place to sit down, and it can be like a water station with those little cones and a box of saltines, just something if you need calories. Here's some calories. The other thing that I think really would be helpful is to have volunteer handlers backstage. That can be people who can hold your stuff, and that can be people who can help you if you need your big huge dress carried, or that can help make sure when you are going up that ramp that you're not getting caught on things. When I was towed with my castle, since the lift didn't work, I did have to carry my castle up the stairs, but I was assigned a person, and they were like, this is your person, and they will help you. They'll help you on, they'll help you off, they'll help you with whatever you need. They will be here. And so I had my volunteer person backstage. And for people who don't have handlers that can go backstage with them, I think that would be really helpful. And I also think cons should not ban handlers from going backstage, which is another thing that I've seen. Or they've limited the number of handlers, and sometimes for those really big costumes, you need more than one.
Absolutely, I agree with that. What about you, Brian? I mean, we haven't heard much from you.
I mean, I definitely feel you on the handlers. I could have used one when I did Sailor Pluto a couple of years ago. That one and the seating in general. For when I did that cosplay, it was really interesting because I didn't realize I could sit down until 4 hours later. Into the from beginning of judging 4 hours, we still were in the middle of the show had already just started, and I forgot that the front of the skirt that I had was one of those open front skirts full ball gown, but it was open front in the very front, and I could just slide a chair up underneath the front of it, and I didn't realize that for a long time. Kim was there when I was
I
like,
think we got to a bar stool if memory serves, but yeah.
it was just a regular chair. I turned it around backwards
okay.
and just sat down on top of it, and I remember Kim was there, and she was just like, what?
The sigh of relief that came out of you.
Finally, you sit down. But I also want to just say, also, like, Mandy mentioned about having snacks and people having snacks backstage. That's always a really good thing. And it doesn't have to be, or I think it was Abby that mentioned that. You don't have to have big, expensive snacks. Plate of fruit, vegetables, something you can munch on, because those cons last, or the time you start a contest, the time it ends is a long time sometimes.
Bring your leftover Halloween candy and toss it in a bowl. Give us something, and you definitely want to have something on hand for diabetics, because God knows.
And I do love the idea.
Sugar crashes are bad.
Yes, especially for you. I do also agree, like, with the just the handlers, having a handler backstage and stuff like that, and just so that they can keep an eye on you, because those costumes get really warm, and sometimes you have to have somebody say, hey, you need to drink water.
Yeah, that's true. All right, Kim, what about you?
All right, so I'm going to say something because I've been pushing it for this con for years. It is run by a massive corporation. They host some of the largest conventions in the United States.
Oh, careful, you're going to get it banned.
They have regional and multi-level international competitions. And the ramp in the leg I compete in, we call the ramp of death, because although they have a ramp, it is angled like this. There's a lip this high to get onto the ramp. So the panic attack they had when I showed up in a wheelchair last year because someone didn't read the notes there was a wheelchair coming, and they realized it couldn't get on the stage for their massive competition. And I'm like, I should be able to walk it, but you guys need to fix this, because it might get to the point where you'll lose competitors because of your access. But it wasn't just me. We had ball gowns. I believe there were, have you seen Ever After Danielle DeBarbarak? She has those mule heel shoes. We had 3 needlework entries that had those type of shoes. And they were slipping and almost rolling their ankle on the ramp because they couldn't function in these hoop gowns and those shoes on that steep of a ramp. The armor entries were having issues. So yeah, it's been a problem. The first year that I was backstage with that convention, they had a much better ramp that was a gentler slope, and then they've had the ramp of death ever since. And it's something that a bunch of us who compete in that every year actually joined together and created a squad. And so we all bombard their emails with things that need fixed like that and put it on all of the feedback. So we're hoping to kind of bully them into access.
It's not bullying, it's advocacy. There's a difference.
Right. It's for a positive change on the impact, because it isn't just me, a singular competitor. It affects every competitor has almost ate it coming off that ramp.
No kidding.
And it's hard.
Good point with ball gowns. You can't see your feet. There's no way. That's usually they're hidden, and especially if you're wearing lifts in your feet, if you have heels or a platform heel of any kind. And some people do that. I did it when I did drag. I had a pair of shoes that had 2-inch platforms, and then the heel. So I was up 6 and 7 inches off the ground. It was already on top of my 6'2" stature.
With a lap or with a lip like that, that's a recipe for breaking your neck. Sorry, Mandy, what were you going to say?
No, you're good. I was just saying, kind of kidding, one thing that Kim was saying, just in my experience with various cons, I feel that some of the fan-run cons tend to have a little bit more respect for cosplayers. Unfortunately, some of these big corporate profit cons tend to have a little less respect for cosplayers and tend to put some of these accessibility issues to the back burner, which is tough to navigate.
This is one of the things that, what everybody said, I think is excellent, feedback, especially for cons to consider. But I kind of want to make sure that people are also, these convention people are also hearing us when we say, we need the information ahead of time. we need to know, what are your rules? Like, you put your rules up, great. I'm glad to see your rules. I want to know what your rubrics are. I want to know how all this works. But I also want to know, what's the size of your stage? What's the dimensions? How long is the ramp? Is it accessible, or is it a ramp of death? Does it have a 2-inch lip at the top? Am I going to have to figure out how to navigate that? Can you, like, if you know you're putting out a 32 by 10 stage, will there be an X on center stage? Can you mark that with tape? Is it already marked? Do I need to request that? Who do I send my disability requests to? Who do I
But
contact?
it's so hard. It's so hard to get that information sometimes. And I think because we're going through the contest runners to the convention, to the event center, like I had a contest that I went to, and they sent out a big email like asking what kind of accommodations you need and if you have any, disabilities to consider. And the only thing that I asked for is I was like, I need somewhere to sit down between, when I need to be actively doing something. I just need a chair. And guess what? There wasn't any chairs when I got there.
And
I stood up for about 10 hours.
Yeah, some of the simplest accommodations seems to be the ones they missed. I mean, Todd, when you and I...
access to a bathroom.
Yes.
Yeah.
And let me just put it this way. Denying somebody the ability to leave to go to the restroom because you're like, no, you're going to miss your call. That's not okay. There are too many disabilities, period, that involve the plumbing. And we don't need to have issues being allowed to leave. That's a whole thing. I mean, Todd, you and I had a lot of conversations surrounding plumbing, and various other things, over the last few years. So
as an advocate, I've had to do a lot of unusual things in my job and talk about a lot of unusual things in my job. Sitting with a cosplayer talking about medical needs relating to plumbing and how far away the bathroom is by counting footsteps is one of the things that I consider very unusual in my job. But I think the best practice is to have a policy to start with. And I'm going to say something that I'm going to openly admit to everyone is going to talk out of both sides of my mouth. Are you ready?
Yep.
Advocates do not want to attack conventions for lack of being accessible. They just want the conventions to be accessible.
Correct.
We recognize the smaller conventions may not have the money or the time or the resources to do it. The larger conventions, however, need to be taught a different lesson about what that means. Because if you're a convention that's bringing in 40,000 people at $100 a pop, you're going to have a difficult time convincing a regulatory entity at where you are that you are suddenly so financially hamstrung that you can't afford $1,200 to install a ramp.
And this is another thing. When you've got advocates or cosplayers advocating for themselves, and to be fair, I have been an advocate for longer than I've had children. Disabilities and educational advocate, legal advocate. But if you are going to be trying to advocate for yourself or advocating with a convention, what can they not legally do, Todd?
It is a separate claim under the Americans with Disabilities Act to retaliate against someone who requests a reasonable accommodation and advocates for it.
Correct.
Retaliation is a separate claim, even if they were right on the ability to accommodate you, right? Let's say that the ramp was too expensive and they couldn't do it. They could win on the whole thing about not being able to provide a ramp, but if they retaliated against you for asking, that's a whole different thing, and they lose on that every time.
Like telling judges that this person can't be considered because they requested an accommodation that couldn't be given.
Correct.
Or telling judges that the mobility equipment that's being used on stage can be counted against someone because it's not
Correct.
costumed.
Correct.
Or
And
not allowing a service dog on stage because it's not in costume. All of these things are retaliation.
Well, and remember, my favorite, because we do this all the time, especially with service animals, right? When you're dealing with service animals, you can't deny service animals access to anything because somebody else is afraid or allergic to a dog or an animal.
Yes.
That allergy has to be anaphylactic, and even if it was, you still have to reasonably accommodate the ability for the service dog to do their job, whatever that job is. The thing that frustrates me as an advocate is that these things are so easy to fix because they're not. All of the things we just talked about are not cost-related entries. Those are things that you put in a policy, you educate your staff on what to do and what not to do, and the problem can be fixed literally at the snap of a finger, right? But we get caught up in this argument about what we're worried about. I've been an advocate for 30 years. People with disabilities, they're going to sue us. It's going to cost us millions.
They hate us. They just want us to change things because they're just mean.
Right. Okay. None of this stuff is true.
No.
Right.
Not in the
And I say it to every organization that even approaches me. My job is to get you out of trouble before you get into trouble.
Yes.
I don't care if you want to do it for the lowest dollar amount you can reasonably find. I only require that you obey the law, that you think about things reasonably. And like I said, the ramp of death, that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
No, it's
Right.
not. Because it is an accident waiting to happen.
Right.
It's an
For a
accident that's
able-bodied
probably
person.
already happened that somebody just hasn't reported yet.
But somebody says, and I'll give you an example as to how that could happen. Somebody says, well, I have this ramp that I use because my cousin's band brings equipment up on it. So instead of having to pay the stager for a ramp that would be legal, they're going to save that $1,200 and they're going to use the ramp of death that's meant to carry audio equipment.
Yeah.
Right? And we get that. Sometimes it's about catch as catch can, but you got to look at that in terms of the basic safety of the participants. And this isn't me as a disability advocate saying, you know, you got to do this for me because I'm a wheelchair user. For those people watching, I didn't say it, but I am. I'm looking at it like, I don't want anybody to fall. I want transitions on the stage to be smooth. I want people to be confident, because if you want to be judged fairly, right, cosplayers need to be worried more about their performance than about the reasonable accommodation and the physical environment they're performing in.
Yes. And
Right.
this particular contest is a massive part of their convention. It's not just another costume contest. It is a huge part of what they offer.
And
they know that.
They're one of the largest international costume competitions in the world.
But the best practice is an honest conversation.
Exactly.
Right? Because policies that can stand the test of time are going to always start with an honest conversation.
Yeah, and Tehdy B, I think you were talking about this when I cut you off a little bit to grab Mandy there, so I apologize. You were talking about the best practice, and I knew he was going to get to it, so I wanted to bring it back to you. Can you finish up what you were saying?
Yeah, with those, like when it comes to like footwear and stuff like that, and ramps in general, like when you're like me, like I said, I did drag and I sometimes wear extra high heels. I don't know where the bottom of my foot is sometimes.
Yeah.
Like you think the bottom of your foot is where it's at, but no, it's 2 inches lower. And like I've did a performance once where I almost bit the dust because I didn't realize I'd worn them once or twice and didn't realize how much extra room I needed to move my feet. That goes also with cosplayers in general. When you're working with your cosplays, anything you're working with, mobility aids, anything, practice with it first. Get used to it. Get comfortable with it, and making sure you're understand what that has to do with when you're working with it, when you're doing performance.
I think that's one of the most important things to get across to anybody that's doing cosplay, whether you're a veteran or whether you're brand new, right, guys? Like, if you build something and you've never worn it before, I don't care how many times you built it, try it out, right? Like, give it a shot. But there can be such a thing as testing too much. Like, you don't want to over test and then do damage to yourself, to the item, that kind of thing. But
it's just about familiarity, right? If you're cosplaying, even if you've cosplayed forever and you're in an event and for whatever reason you're not in the mobility device that you prefer. This happens a lot with power wheelchair users. They don't want to fly with power wheelchairs on planes because they get damaged, and these are $10,000 devices. So they're going to fly somewhere and they're going to rent something from the vendor at the event when they land, right? So now it's not the device they're used to. It's something else. It's a scooter. It's a wheelchair that's differently sized. A little practice is good for that. Yeah. And a reasonable accommodation is appropriate to ask for that, so that you can have access to the staging to do 5 or 10 minutes of practice, so that you're not running over the edge of the stage line or running over the feet of the guy standing on the ramp behind you from the scooter they rented you that was turned up a little too far towards Bunny when it should have been towards Turtle.
But that's a huge challenge. Go.
Also, I was going to say that brings up another point too, with the ramp in general. I know Abby mentioned earlier about having the elevator, the lift behind the stage, and it was too narrow. Making sure for who are setting these up, making sure you have a ramp that's wide enough for just the basic wheelchairs in general, but then knowing that you're going to have cosplayers who are coming up in probably bigger builds that need to be able to use those to get up. So having a wider ramp is usually better than just a small, narrow ramp that might be able to fit a regular wheelchair that might not be able to fit those rental scooters.
Yeah, I just wanted to hit on what Todd was saying about practicing, because I know it is a big conflict that a lot of these contests are being held on the main stage. And so conventions don't want to give up main stage time to let contestants get on the stage before the actual show time. But I think that does cause a lot of problems, because you don't always even realize what your accessibility issues are until it's your turn to walk, and there's just not time to address these things. So I think convincing conventions that we need to have a little bit of time to at least see what the space is and walk across it before we go out there is really, really important to accessibility.
Yeah,
I would sell that as a safety issue.
I have actually gone to cons where they had mandatory rehearsal times, which there's an element of that is great. Like, great, I get to see the stage. But especially when you're talking about cons where there's prejudging, that can mean that you are expecting people to be in their costume or at least at the con for hours.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes, like, I'm one person where I can have flare-ups where I wake up in the morning and everything's fine, and then by the time I get to the end of the day, I can't have my costume on anymore. Yeah. And so there is an element where it's like, I like that the option of a rehearsal is there, but having them mandatory also creates another element to it.
Yeah.
But sorry, to just go back real quick, people were talking about retaliation and judging and including stuff like that. The cosplay community is a really small community. It's very insular. Everybody knows everybody. And I know a lot of judges, and I don't know a single judge who would fault somebody for having a walking aid or a medical device or glasses. Like, really, the people in the community are not going to hold that. stuff against them.
Well, especially if they're judges inside the community. But there are a lot of events that choose their own judges who specifically are exterior to the community. And so when the event runner says, don't consider that person because of this, or, you have to consider the fact that this is not costumed, or that, whatever, those people don't know that that's not the community standard because they're listening to the contest runner.
And there are people who do that, and they're the competitions where it has to be like an exact replica, and that's its own ball of wax.
But but I think a lot of those
judges that are cosplayers, they really are very open to seeing cosplayers with those other needs and those mobility aids.
Yeah, I think it definitely goes back to know your contest too. Like, do the research on the contest before you join. We've talked about that on a couple of other episodes as well. Like, get familiar with the competition. But one of the things that I think you were hitting on, Abby, that I think is really, really important, actually, when we're talking about the length of time that contests exist, right, in an event, it's really important for contest runners and for the convention runners to sit down and say, okay, we need a space that is a green room, and we need it for this amount of time. We need a space that is the stage for the presentation part, and we need it for this amount of time. But we need a space, or we need time on that stage that's a separate amount of time. And I don't care if it's the day before, day of, whatever. It can run at the same time as prejudging, as far as I'm concerned. That's what we did with, one of our contests. They would hit prejudging, they would come straight over, they would walk our stage, tell us what they need. We'd adjust their lights, test their sound, all of that all at the same time. That way people are getting an idea of how they can get on and off. It's better if you've got all the charts and graphs and stuff ahead of time, but some things you're just not going to know until you're on set. Todd, I think you were about to say something there.
Well, it was just the quick thing about best practice, because I'm agreeing with Abby that there are a lot of people in the community that are accepting and can make those mental modifications. But from an event standpoint, if you don't know that, then your policy needs to make sure that you review that stuff with your judges. Yeah. Right? Because
not just judges, photographers.
Photographers as well, yeah, that's true.
Right.
And your tech people.
What I was gonna Go
ahead.
What I was gonna say earlier when we were talking about no judge will discount you for your mobility aids. We had issues at multiple cons in the past where the official con photographer told them, take off your glasses. That'll be ugly in the picture. I don't want your cane in the picture. Can you get out of the wheelchair? And they thought that was coming from the judges, and that's why they didn't win. So they need to do some sensitivity training a little bit ahead of time with con staff and photography, so that they don't get in trouble and their judges don't get this unfair thing put on them for that as well.
Yeah,
and
with tech staff
it goes back to that written policy again, right? Yeah. And I hate to kind of drive that home. But if you're following a policy, right, that you scoped out yourself and you say, okay, we're going to make sure that the stage is accessible. We're going to make sure that everybody who works, in the masquerade area knows these things about making the thing accessible, right? If everybody knows that and it's reviewed with everyone, even if that review takes 15 minutes or a half hour, it protects everybody. It protects the rights of the disabled cosplayers. It protects the convention, because if somebody goes rogue, right, and it becomes a problem and somebody files a complaint, the policy allows the convention to go, look, we reviewed this policy with that con photographer, right? Yeah. So we can hold him responsible for that. And we can take care of that without you having to make a big deal about it, because we did that with the con photographer. We did that with the judges. Now, the judges that are already in the sphere and know how to be accepting, they're going to nod and smile because they know this is coming. The ones that have never heard it before because they're stars at the event and maybe they've never judged a masquerade before.
Yeah.
Right?
We've dealt with that a lot.
Doing that review for 10 minutes reminds them that, okay, these people are playing by a set of rules. Right?
All cons should have this because I have never had this told to me, and I have judged multiple conventions, and none of the con owners. I'm lucky if I see them.
Yeah, no, that's because most conventions are not doing this, and in fact,
Mhm.
I had when I was the vice president and acting president of the ICG. One of the things that I started pushing when we started rewriting the rules for the ICG. Fair and ethical guidelines for competition was to include a lot of this stuff in to try and get it somewhere where it was official, so that cons that are going out and going, well, we're going to do a costume contest, so wait, what are rules for costume contests, since most of them use the fair and ethical guidelines, right? So
Yep.
We tried to get it in there, and in the process found out that some in the community are not as accepting and embracing as they would like to be, which is its own separate episode and issue. But we started presenting all of this information out to the community. One sec.
Use your indoor screams.
That was.
I'm going to scream. Okay, sorry. Anyway.
That's all right.
Back.
And of course, the dog is still telling me I need to go eat dinner, which is
Rah, 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 rah.
Ark, 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 ark. He's behind a door. He can't get to me at the moment. Anyway. So, as I was saying, but when we get to that whole, section of thinking where, we've got rules, we've got guidelines, and, we've put them out there so that these conventions can take a look and say, yeah, okay, we like this. That's where these policies begin, right? Is those documents. And Todd, you actually, you developed your document based off of some of those documents, right?
Yes.
So, it's very helpful. And if you don't know, if you're a con runner and you don't know where to find these things, ask a costumer or a cosplayer. And if they don't know, go to your social media and say, hey, we're developing a policy. We're looking for input from our, attendees. You will get more input than you will know what to do with. And I guarantee you at least one of those inputs will come from someone that has a clue.
And I think it's important as we're sending these things to cons too. It's kind of, Todd was talking about this and y'all too, that it doesn't have to be scary. Like, having accessibility and accommodation isn't, this like laundry list of things you have to do. It's actually pretty simple, a lot of these things to implement. And
it's not prohibitively expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And the people trying to get you to get there are not villains.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And honestly, just talking to your judges about these kinds of changes would go so far. I did a performance last year and I couldn't walk. I had to wear all my braces. My scooter would have looked ugly on stage. I was aerial. I was all pretty. My scooter was kind of like an eyesore, didn't fit. So I had to put a chair in the center of the stage for me to sing from. And then, like, partway through the song, I just stood up and kind of, like, motioned to the audience. It was very minimal, but it was very impactful because of the audience connection I had. And the judge, one of the judges, without thinking at the very end, said to the whole audience, yeah, if you're singing, I want you to stand up from your chair and walk around the stage. And I want you to sing over here and sing over here. And my intro literally said I was disabled and had mobility issues. That made me feel awful.
Yeah.
And it made me feel like I didn't win because I didn't do what he expected, which is general feedback for performances. But I think it's something you don't think about until you're disabled and needs to change the criteria.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important. My right to disclose when I choose is protected. All right. It is separately protected. You cannot force me to disclose. So the big thing about that story was that written without you?
I wrote it. I sent it in.
Yeah, and
because I knew that I was told in the past, you didn't utilize the stage enough. And I'm like, well, that's because I didn't want to fall down.
Yeah.
And so I put in there, I was disabled, to give them a reason of why I'm not doing what they expect, because that is the general, when you're doing performances, you have to use up the stage. And it's kind of very ableist without trying to be.
Very much.
So I disclosed that because I wrote my intro, because I knew it would be an issue, and then it was anyway because he wasn't even listening.
And this is also something for like judges in general, is especially for the performance ones. Like I've seen
this is very
number of performances where the person in the center stage doesn't move at all.
Yeah.
But they command that entire stage, and there is a pin drop. It depends on how you perform it and everything. And Kim, I was there. I was there. And you did just that. And I'm not sure exactly how the one judge didn't see that. We know we've been there. But it's just, you can command a stage without having to move all over the stage.
And I'm just going to say this, because like there have been travesties of, disability, accessibility denials, right? That have precipitated the need to put things into introductions that should not have to be there.
Right.
And I'm going to use an example because this is one of the big reasons that I started fighting as hard as I did with one of my favorite conventions. But, I have, like I said, I have 5 amazingly genetically disabled kids. And, 3 of them were competing with us one year, and we had, the need to have mobility accommodation on stage, not just for the kids, but also for me, because that was a year that I was having particularly difficult time with the MS, and I was refusing to take the injectables because they make you sick, and I really didn't want to do it. And so I emailed the con ahead of time and said, I'm bringing something really big and really ambitious this year, and it's going to be intense. We're going to need access to be able to bring it into the costuming contest location before the event. And it's got, the need to be charged. We have to be able to plug it in to charge it so that it can still be able to be used. And, all of this other stuff. And they were great ahead of time with emailing and talking and communicating with us. And then I don't know what happened, but when we got there, everything fell apart. And so we had everything plugged in. It got unplugged. The batteries ended up getting drained because we were testing and trying to make sure that everything could function on stage. And, it became a huge problem, and it was a travesty. So we started fighting very, very hard to make sure that particular contest didn't run into these kind of problems again, because that was an issue with somebody kind of being retaliatory towards us for having to have that much accommodation. And Todd helped with that amazingly well. Like, I can't even tell you, he is a godsend. He is an amazing resource and very, very helpful.
And I am one of many, because again, I do not believe my own press. So for all you con runners out there, I will tell you that nearby you there is a disability professional, just like I am. You can consult with any of your local independent living centers and ask them, and they will help you.
And if you're in the state of Virginia, they're going to send you to me. I'm just warning you.
Well, okay, but
and I don't believe my own press either.
And by the way, we have a lot of experienced cosplayers and convention attendees with disabilities that are running disability services departments or support departments, that their experience is valuable and can be used to start that discussion.
Yeah.
So con runners shouldn't be afraid to kind of look in their own backyards for that. And if they get into like the technical weeds, then come and find an IL guy or your local disability and business technical assistance centers, now called ADA centers. Every federal region's got one. You can ask them. All that stuff is free of charge. Get into it and ask around.
Worst case scenario, pick up the phone and call an employment law attorney. They're going to help you find someone.
Right.
One thing
And
that I think could be really helpful, especially just at the con, is if there is a person, boots on the ground, who you can contact there, and you have their contact information and you can reach out to them.
Yes.
Because a lot of times when they're like, send us an email if you have a question, and it's like contest at whatever con. And
Right.
it's like, nobody's going to answer this.
Yeah, and they read
Because
it
they're
whenever
all
they
at
get around
work,
to
and
it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, but you need to have that one person where, let's say you go to prejudging, and then as you're leaving prejudging, you trip and fall, and now your arm's in a cast, and you still want to go and walk the stage. You could be like, hey, something happened, and now I'm going to do a stage walk with a cast. Sorry.
Something happened on the way to the con, and guess what?
Yeah.
I mean,
there are times when you could be like, I started the day and I was okay, but it turns out I'm going to have to just wear sneakers. That's what's going to happen. I have to make some changes. And then you can have that person who can then pass it on to the judges to be like, there's been some changes, just ignore them.
Yeah. Well,
Somebody
what
might
I was...
be.
I'm sorry.
Hold on a minute. Somebody might be watching this to find out more about people with disabilities in cosplay.
Yeah.
And before we go any further, I want to say something as somebody who doesn't. Okay? I'm not a cosplayer. I have never developed that level of detail or that desire to perform.
Now, I've seen you in a Batman shirt.
That's true, but I don't necessarily call that cosplay or the Bajoran earring either. But you guys that are thinking about doing it or thinking about working with your families or relatives who might be a little older in doing it, let this conversation be a guide to you, but don't let it be a barrier to you.
Yes.
Right? Everybody who comes to a convention who participates in cosplay is adding something to the milieu of something I love. And I look around for disabled cosplayers and take photographs of their work, even if they don't do a masquerade or a costume contest.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So all of you guys can absolutely do this and develop whatever you want to develop from that. Personality, characterization, whatever you want that comes from that. You should be encouraged to try.
Yes.
Because all of my job and all of my fellow cosplayers on this episode, we're here to want to make sure that there's more of it, not less. Because it's what we love.
And
I can't do it, but I'll watch the hell out of it.
And I really have to sort of start to bring this in because we are running out of time here. But I have to bring this in with, that contest that we were just talking about that I had such a horrific experience with that started this whole, Todd helped me get this done thing that I've done for the last few years. We really saw I felt like we won 2 years ago because we got the policy, but I knew we won this year. And that's because Todd, I don't know that you know this, but did you know that particular contest had a disabled winner this year?
I am aware of that.
That's Kim and Brian.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So it's, I don't want contests and conventions to get scared of this because that's actually the first time that's happened.
Mm-hmm.
That particular contest didn't have a lot of success for people with disabilities, and the community had gotten really tired of trying, and they were abandoning that contest, and it's sad because that contest has a great history.
And now,
oh my gosh, it was such a that was the most fun I think we've had competing this year.
Yeah,
even with my ankle sprained the size of a grapefruit.
But here's the thing: you can go from not doing it right and the word getting out and less people wanting to do it in the space of a couple of years with just some honest conversation and some basic advocacy around a policy, you can restart people's enthusiasm, right? Because you're starting a culture change.
Yes.
And that particular event, one of the amazing things about that was that the people that were working the event were the first people to say, oh my God, this was such a good idea. The weight's off.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to figure out like what to tell people.
It makes you wonder why they villainized me for so many years.
Right.
I was going to say with that, Mary, it was interesting because the year before we did a skit.
Yes.
I joined you all with that, and it was I don't know how it was the year before because I didn't see it the year before, but I can from your descriptions,
Yes.
it was not the most pleasant experience. And then the year that year, it was okay. It wasn't
was
the best,
okay.
but it was okay.
I did it the year before as well. The behind the stage staff was amazing because I did have my scooter and I just got up and did my stage show and then went back to my scooter. So they parked me next to the stage somewhere cool that I wasn't in the way. So I had a good experience the year before, like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a big makes or break it, even just in general. With that is, if you have staff that's working it, are they helping? Are they pushing this, helping it to go? And the more people you have that are just there to really support you, support all the cosplayers who are in there, regardless of disabilities or not, it makes it just an enjoyable experience for everybody.
Yep.
And so 2 years ago was the year that Todd convinced them to put the policy in place. And then he trained everyone on the policy. So I am very glad to hear you had that experience that year.
Because I did it before and it really wasn't super accommodating. I don't think there was actually a ramp. Like I had done it like 4 or 5 years before.
Yeah.
And so it was nice to see the massive turnaround and it's just going up. And so putting that policy has made a massive impact.
Yeah. So
and we have to applaud the event and the people that sat and had those conversations and looked at that and did the honest analysis that they did.
Yeah.
Which goes back to that whole thing about, it's not about villainizing anybody. It's about creating access creates opportunity.
And it all goes back to the cause positivity movement, right? We want this community to be positive, upbeat, uplifting. We want people to know that they can go out, they can be anything they want to be. They can, there's no such thing as I can't cosplay that. You can do whatever you put your mind to, and the community is going to be there for it. And I think we saw that in spades a few years ago, Mandy, when you got to go to, and I am so jealous. She is such an amazing host. Can you tell us about your appearance on that show? Because wow.
Yeah. So I did a cosplay of Cinderella. It's been 4 or 5 years ago now. Which if people haven't heard about it, instead of giving her glass slippers, I decided to give her a glass arm, which I should have brought with me today, but that's okay. But anyway, I was invited to come and speak on the Kelly Clarkson show, which was just an amazing experience. I think it was one of the first times that was really, really public about cosplayers having a disability and not trying to hide it, like actually making that an integral artistic part of their cosplay. And it was just a really great experience. Like, Kelly is an amazing person. Like, she's just full of joy. And it was just really cool that she gave me the opportunity to just kind of share my story and share how our disabilities really can be portrayed as a positive part of us, and how, we get to kind of choose how to tell our own stories. And that's really the heart of all this.
And
it's your narrative. So
yeah, I think one of the biggest takeaways from cosplay that everybody in the community should hopefully grasp and carry with them, and if they take nothing else from this episode, I want them to feel this. Like, you were born in the body you were in. You are perfect the way you were born. And the body that you are in, you can cosplay anything you want to, any way you want to.
Betcha.
It's your own self-expression, your own art, and we're all here for it, and we can't wait to see what you do.
Yes. Love it.
All right. Well, I am going to give you guys an opportunity to tell everyone how they can find you and get in touch with you if, they have other questions, if they're interested, or if they just want to, give you some fan love. So, we're going to start with the amazing Todd Vaarwerk and then work our way back around, because now all the squares have changed. Thank you, Zoom.
So, if you're looking for me and you want to talk to me about anything disability related, you can just email me. My email address is Vaarwerk, spelled like my last name, V as in Victor, AARWERK @gmail.com.
All righty. And Abby, where can they find you?
You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at AbbyCat Cosplay. If you are interested in ancient references and very comedic takes on things, that's what you can go to me for.
Love
if
it.
you like a good cosplay from a one-off character from 60 years ago, I'm going to cosplay that character.
I love that. I just think that's so cool. Some of the stuff you've done just boggles my mind. It's so awesomely autistic. All right, Kim, where can we find you?
I'm on Instagram as Kim_is_possible, as well as on Facebook, and my TikTok is Kim Is Possible Cosplay, all one word. If you are a horse person, you can see my plastic ponies up there. I also have an account for my art that is very horse centered, and that is Rack and Roll Studios, RACKNROLL Studios. So yeah, that's my autism, is I got the horse autism.
Love it. I got a daughter with the horse autism. It's a great one, man. Equine therapy rocks.
Right. I collect the ponies, I ride them, I paint the model horses, I sculpt them, I love it.
Just asking, are there any other jigsaw puzzle autisms out there, or is that just...
Oh my God, I've been doing jigsaw puzzles since I was like knee-high to a grasshopper.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow, I just used that phrase. Okay,
You absolutely did.
Do I need to? Yeah. Okay. There's 4 lines there for everybody counting. All right.
Yeah, I got 3 here, so I'm right behind you.
All righty, Mandy. What about you? Where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Be the Spark Cosplay. And yeah, I'd love to chat cosplay or even kind of telling people what to expect backstage if they're interested in doing contests and have disabilities or just in general.
Awesome. All right. Tehdy, I haven't let you plug your new stuff yet. You got to plug it.
Which new stuff?
You know, your Tehdy B stuff.
Oh, yeah. So I just recently, in the past 4 months, I keep forgetting it's been 4 months now, changed up everything I've done. So in the previous past life, actually somebody messaged me and was like, wait, that's you? You're the same person? Oh, yeah, it's me. In the past life, I used to be Sailor Sister cosplay, and TikTok used to be all that, and then I changed it. So now it's Tehdy B cosplay. It's based off of my D&D character, who's a dwarf dragon druid who turns into a little teddy bear.
So if you were wondering where that graphic that I created was from, he told me that, and I went, okay, I'm going to draw him.
There it is. It's fun.
I like the ears. They're fun. You said dwarf. I was like, long hair, long beard. We're good. But anyway. And of course, I'm Mera Rose. You can find me at prophouse42.com and shimmerandshadefamilycosplay.com or shimmerandshade.com. I think we have that one back now. I don't remember. But for now, of course, we're Defying Conventionalism, so you can always find us at defyingconventionalism.com. We really appreciate all of you guys for joining us today. We're going to have more in this series. If you enjoyed our guests today, don't worry. They will be back. We know how to get them. We can find them. We can call them. We even know what cons they're going to next. Check the schedule.
One of them knows where my house is.
I know where she lives.
Wait, what? I don't know where it is. Oh, it's him. It's him.
Yeah. She's like 2 miles away. Well, about 4 miles away from me.
Don't out people. We don't dox people. Anyway. All
right.
right.
They still figure out where I am.
So if you're getting a lot of snow and your winter has gone crazy, we hope you're staying warm and cozy inside. Work on your cosplays. Send us pictures. We can't wait to see them. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
You got this.